Hi folks, so this is the context video that's going to give you some context for the poems that we're reading this unit. The first one that you likely read and the first one that is on the list is The Passionate Shepherd to His Love by Christopher Marlowe. So this poem was written in 1599, which feels like forever ago, but it is still in, our modern English. It qualifies as what's called a pastoral poem. And pastoral poetry was an era of poetry that idealized the rural lifestyle, or a lifestyle that was heavy in agriculture and farming, living in the countryside with lots of land and very minimal industrialization. Um, and these poems were typically written by urban poets, so poets who lived more close to what we would consider a city at the time. And they were kind of fantasy poems of a simpler and slower life. So while these poems were beautiful depictions of rural life and the countryside and agricultural living, they were definitely fantastical, and maybe idealized or romanticized that kind of lifestyle. They didn't realize maybe how hard that kind of life was, how much hard work goes into, agriculture. And they probably had never done any actual living like that. They were fantasizing about that lifestyle instead of actually living it, right? So because of that, those poems were sometimes criticized. It reminds me of the conversation about country music nowadays, about how there are like country music artists who have never truly been like, cowboys or worked on ranches before, but they'll write music about like the cowboy lifestyle and ranch living, farm living, and that like fantasy life that they're dreaming of is kind of idealized in these stories and in these songs. But because of this idealized version of rural life portrayed in the poems, some of these poets who were writing this way were criticized by other parts of the world. And this poem, particularly, and the pastoral poem movement in general, inspired a popular anti-era called the anti-pastoral era, where works in that genre, most famously, The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd by Sir Walter Raleigh, kind of wrote against or retorted back to those pastoral poems of the previous century. And so these two poems, The Passionate Shepherd and The Nymph's Reply, are written directly into conversation with each other. That's one of the reasons you are not allowed to write about those two together for the poetry essay, is because Sir Walter Raleigh wrote The Nymph's Reply in direct response to The Passionate Shepherd. So he's kind of being cheeky by replying with his own narrator in The Nymph to the narrator of The Passionate Shepherd, who is the shepherd. So in that way, this is a very conversational set of poems here. In Robert Frost's Nothing Gold Can Stay, it's a very brief poem. It's, I think, only 8 lines, and there are themes of the impermanence of beauty, so beauty not being something that can last forever, that joy and youth are transient, again, meaning there's nothing that can last forever that is enjoyable. So joy, beauty, youth, all of those things are positively associated, they're valuable, and because of that, they are impermanent. They can't last forever. There's a lot of nature imagery in this poem, and remember, that's one of the big trifecta, the themes: death, nature, and love. Nature is one of them. There's nature imagery and symbolism. Gold, meaning like the actual metal gold, as something precious and valuable, and green, meaning both the color green, like leaves in nature, but also green as in someone who is green. So someone who's youthful and innocent, someone new to whatever they're doing, or whoever, someone who is green is young, right? Or new to the scene. An allusion is a reference to something. So Like if I were writing a poem and I made a reference to Hercules, just the story of Hercules, that would be an allusion to Hercules. So here they are making an allusion to the Bible by referring to the Garden of Eden in the line, "So Eden sank to grief." And this allusion means that only, even the most wonderful place, Eden, even the most, perfect instance in all of human history, are temporary. Even that place was temporary. And that is the curse and wonder of being human, right? Robert Frost is saying that though this curse of temporality is difficult, it is also the thing that makes those experiences so wonderful. In Emily Dickinson's Because I Could Not Stop for Death, this picture is not typically associated, it's not related to that poem. I just picked it because it reminded me of the poem. But death is personified. Personification is giving person-like characteristics to a non-person entity or a non-person thing. So death is obviously not a person. Death is an idea, right? But here, death is a character in the play, in the poem. So death is personified here as a courteous individual coming to pick up our narrator. This subverts typical depictions of death. If we recall, for example, death in some of the previous works we've read, like think back to moments when people have died in the short stories that we've read, like in A Good Man is Hard to Find, or in Cask of Amontillado. Death was treated as something dark and eerie, right? Something to be avoided. But here, death is a courteous, like gentlemanly figure. So that's subverting typical depictions of death. The whole poem has an extended metaphor of the journey of life and then, death at the end of that journey. And it's reflected in the imagery and symbolism within the poem. This poem has a rhyme scheme, but it also leans heavily onto slant rhyme. Slant rhyme is also known as approximate rhyme or half rhyme, where the rhyming sounds at the end of the lines are very similar to each other, but they are not identical. So let me show you an example. So in the second stanza here, it says, "We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility." Now, if I had maybe a heavy British accent and I read that a little differently, and I leaned into some of the syllables in a different way, I could maybe make that I had put away and for his civility, maybe I could make those lines rhyme. And the point is that they are supposed to rhyme, kind of, because in the previous stanza, it says, "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality." So me and immortality rhyme there, right? So the rhyme here is supposed to be that the second and fourth line of the stanza rhyme. But when we move to the second stanza, the second and fourth lines of this stanza are slant rhyme because they are not a perfect rhyme. They are approximate. These words kind of sound very similar, but they are not entirely a perfect rhyme. Emily Dickinson does slant rhyme a lot, whereas Robert Frost, he has perfect rhymes every time. That's the thing they say about Robert Frost, perfect rhyme every time. All of the rhymes in his poem here and the poem that we will see annotated in that annotation video, they are perfect rhymes. Every single rhyme that he makes is perfect, and he works really hard to do that. Emily Dickinson would rather choose her words really carefully and put the words that she likes in her poem, even if they don't rhyme perfectly. So that is some context So that is some context to just a few of the poems that we read for this unit. Some other poems that I haven't given you context for here, but that I do think are important. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. Wordsworth is coming from the Romantic era with a capital R, Romanticist era. He is a Romantic poet, and he was probably the biggest Romantic poet of the generation. The Romanticists believed in energy within everything that exists in the universe, and that there is spirituality in connecting to that energy. And most of the Romantics believed that the energy that you can experience through the universe comes mostly from nature. So when we read a lot of the Romantic poets, we see a lot of poetry about nature and how nature can be spiritually fulfilling, how experiencing nature, you can gain spiritual energy and emotional healing through experiencing nature. And this poem is one of those. It's an example of that. Elegy, Written in a Country Churchyard, is one of my favorite poems. I love that poem. It is a little dense, so take your time with it, but it's a great poem. Mary Oliver is also one of my favorite poets. She's a modern poet. She passed away recently, very recently, but she's a contemporary poet. So I think you'll have a good time reading that poem. I hope you enjoy these poems. Make sure to spend some good time with them, because we don't have a ton of reading, like actual flipping pages reading this unit. I expect you to spend more time with the poems than you would reading the words themselves. Read them several times. See if you can parse out something that you didn't parse out the first time you read it. Read them out loud. Watch a video of someone reading them out loud. Don't be afraid to do that, okay? So if you have any questions when you're reading the poems, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. I'd be happy to meet with you on Teams if you have any other questions. And I can't wait to see what you guys have some ideas about for the discussion board post. All right, bye guys.